The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor as Rose raised her glass higher, her voice carrying across the lakeside mansion's grand dining room. Here's to my dear husband James. 15 years of marriage to a man who signs the checks but isn't the one warming my bed at night. The laughter that followed hit me like ice water. Barrett, Rose's father, chuckled into his brandy. Marjorie, her mother, tittered behind manicured fingers. Chelsea and Danielle, Rose's sisters, exchanged knowing glances as they sipped their wine. Even Philip Larkin, Phil to his friends, my wife's boss, and apparently much more, smirked from his seat at the head of the table. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood. The room fell silent except for the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. 15 years. 15 goddamn years of being the mechanic who got lucky, the grease monkey who married up, the walking ATM for Rose's entitled family. Well, I said, my voice steady as granite. I guess that settles it. I pulled out my house key and placed it next to my untouched anniversary dinner. From my wallet, I withdrew a folded piece of paper, the deed to our vacation house, the one I'd bought and paid for with my own sweat and blood. You'll need this more than me, Rose. The house key, I mean. The cabin's mine. Always has been. Funny how paperwork works. Rose's smile faltered. James, don't be so sensitive. It was just a joke. 15 years of jokes. I straightened my tie, the expensive one she'd bought me for appearances. I'm done laughing. Barrett cleared his throat. Now see here, James. No need to be dramatic. I turned to face him. This man who'd never worked a day in his life, who'd inherited everything and earned nothing. Dramatic? You want to see dramatic, Barrett? Wait until your accountant calls tomorrow. The color drained from his face. Good. Let him sweat. I walked toward the door, my footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet room. At the threshold, I paused and looked back at Rose. She was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't. Enjoy your mansion, sweetheart. Hope the echo keeps you company. The drive home, to what used to be home, gave me time to think. 20 years ago, I'd been James Garrison, owner of Garrison Auto, the best damn mechanic in 3 counties. I'd built my business from nothing, saved every penny, invested smart. Then I'd met Rose at a charity auction, been dazzled by her beauty and charm. What I'd mistaken for class was really just expensive packaging around a rotten core. My phone buzzed. Reggie. Jimmy, you okay? Tommy said he saw you leaving the Pemberton place looking like thunder. Reggie Walsh had been my best friend since high school. Ex-bouncer, current voice of reason, and the only person who still called me Jimmy. If I needed someone to help me move a body, Reggie would ask what size shovel to bring. Not that it would come to that. I had something better than violence planned. Meet me at Murphy's bar in an hour, I said, and call Mia. Tell her I need to see her first thing Monday. Legal trouble? Legal solutions. Murphy's was the kind of place where working men drank working man's beer and minded their own business. Reggie was already there when I arrived, nursing a Budweiser and chatting with Frankie, the bartender who knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it. Heard about the anniversary party, Frankie said as I slid onto a stool. Word travels fast around here. How fast? I asked. Fast enough that I know your wife's been spending a lot of late nights at the Riverside Motel with her boss. Room 237, usually Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Phil Larkin's got expensive taste in cars, but cheap taste in hotels. I ordered a whiskey, neat. What else do you know, Frankie? I know Phil's been bragging to his golf buddies about his conquest. I know Rose has been telling her sisters she's planning to divorce you and take half of everything. And I know you're a hell of a lot smarter than any of them think you are. Reggie leaned closer. What's the play, Jimmy? I took a sip of whiskey, feeling it burn down my throat. Ever hear the story about the frog and the scorpion, Reg? The one where the scorpion stings the frog even though they both drown? That's the one, except in my version, the frog learns to swim in poison. Monday morning, I was waiting in Mia Castellano's office when she arrived with her coffee. Mia was a legal assistant with the soul of a shark and the ethics of a saint, a dangerous combination for anyone on her bad side. James Garrison, she said, settling behind her desk. Reggie said you need help with some paperwork. Divorce papers, and I need to know everything I can legally do to protect my assets. Mia pulled out a yellow legal pad. How much are we talking about? The auto shop's worth about $2 million. I own 3 rental properties outright, worth another $1.5 million. The cabin at Lake Winnebago, that's mine, free and clear, worth about $800,000. Various investments, savings accounts, the works. She whistled low. And your wife? Rose has her trust fund, or she will when her father dies. Right now, she's got about $50,000 in her personal account, and a job at Larkin Development that pays her way too much for what she actually does. Let me guess, sleeping with the boss? Among other things, I slid a manila envelope across her desk. Photos, receipts from the motel, credit card statements showing dinners for two when I was out of town. Frankie at Murphy's has been keeping track. Mia opened the envelope and examined the contents. This is good. Very good. In Maine, adultery doesn't automatically affect property division, but it sure doesn't hurt your case. What else do you want to know? Everything. Every legal way to make their lives complicated. She smiled, and I almost felt sorry for Rose. Almost. Let's start with the trust fund. Barrett Pemberton's family trust has some interesting clauses. If Rose is involved in any scandal that might damage the family reputation, the trustees can freeze distributions. And guess who sits on that board? Tell me. Judge Patricia Morrison. She's Barrett's cousin and a real stickler for moral behavior. She's also the one who'll likely oversee your divorce proceedings. The pieces were falling into place. What about Phil? Philip Larkin's got his own problems. His company's been cutting corners on some construction projects. Nothing criminal, but if the right people started asking questions about building permits and safety inspections... You know the right people? I know everybody, James. That's what you're paying me for. By Wednesday, I'd put the first phase of my plan into motion. Rose came home to find the locks changed and a process server waiting on the front porch. The look on her face when she realized she couldn't get into her own house was worth every penny I'd paid for new deadbolts. She called me 17 times. I answered on the 18th. James, what the hell is going on? I can't get into the house. It's not your house anymore, Rose. Check the deed. My name, my money, my house. You can't do this. I have rights. You have the right to find somewhere else to live. Might I suggest the Riverside Motel? I hear you're familiar with it. The silence stretched long enough that I thought she'd hung up. How did you know about Phil? Honey, half the town knows about Phil. The other half will know by tomorrow. She started crying then. Big dramatic sobs that might have worked on me 15 years ago. Now they just sounded like noise. James, please. We can work this out. I made a mistake. You made a choice. Now you get to live with it. I hung up and immediately called my bank. By the time Rose figured out how to use a payphone, every joint account we'd shared was frozen solid. The credit cards were canceled. The car, the BMW I'd bought her for her 40th birthday, was being repossessed as we spoke. Tommy, one of my mechanics, knocked on my office door. Boss, there's a lady here to see you. Says she's your wife. Ex-wife, I corrected. Send her in. Rose looked like she'd been crying for hours. Her perfect makeup was smeared, her designer dress wrinkled. She clutched a cheap purse, probably borrowed from one of her sisters. We need to talk, she said. No, we don't. We need to get divorced. Everything else is just noise. She sat down without being invited. The house, the accounts, the car. You can't just take everything. Watch me. My father will... Your father will what? Sue me? With what money? Mia tells me the family trust is having some cash flow problems. Something about bad investments and frozen assets. Rose's face went pale. What did you do? Me? Nothing illegal. But it's amazing what happens when the right people start asking the right questions about the Pemberton family finances. Turns out your father's been playing fast and loose with trust fund money for years. You bastard! I leaned back in my chair. I prefer ex-husband. Has a nice ring to it. She stood up, smoothing her dress. This isn't over, James. You're right. It's just getting started. That evening I drove to the Riverside Motel. Phil's silver Mercedes was parked in front of room 237, just like Frankie had said. I parked my truck right behind it, close enough that he couldn't back out without asking me to move. Then I waited. Phil emerged around 10 o'clock, straightening his tie and checking his phone. He was a handsome man, I'd give him that. Silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money. He stopped short when he saw my truck. Garrison. He tried to sound casual, but I could hear the nervousness underneath. Phil? I got out of my truck slowly, making sure he could see I wasn't in any hurry. Nice night for a drive. What do you want? Just wanted to thank you, actually. You did me a favor, sleeping with my wife. Saved me from wasting any more years on her. Phil's confidence flickered. Look, James, what happened between Rose and me is going to cost you everything. I stepped closer. Phil was taller than me, but he'd never thrown a punch in his life. I'd been swinging wrenches since I was 16. See, the thing about small towns is that everybody talks. And when they start talking about how you've been cheating on your wife with your employee, well, that's the kind of scandal that ruins careers. You can't prove anything. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo, him and Rose entering the motel room, clear as day. Frankie's got a good camera on his security system. Amazing what you can see from across the street. Phil's face went white. What do you want? I want you to stay away from my wife, ex-wife. I want you to fire her. And I want you to remember that I know where you live, where you work, and where you like to play. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. There's a difference. I got back in my truck and drove away, leaving Phil standing in the motel parking lot like a scarecrow in an expensive suit. The next morning, Rose called me in hysterics. Phil fired me. He said he couldn't afford to keep me on anymore. That's rough. Maybe you should have thought about job security before you started sleeping with the boss. This is your fault. No, Rose. This is your choice coming home to roost. I'll fight you on the divorce. I'll take you for everything you're worth. With what lawyer? You're unemployed and broke. Good luck finding someone to take your case pro bono. The truth was, I wasn't done yet. Not even close. That weekend was the annual Founders' Day festival in the town square. Half the county showed up for the food trucks, live music, and small-town gossip. It was the perfect place for Phase 2 of my plan. I arrived early and set up a booth for Garrison Auto, handing out flyers and chatting with customers. Rose showed up around noon with her sisters, all of them dressed like they were attending a country club luncheon instead of a small-town festival. I waited until the crowd was thick around the bandstand, then I made my move. Ladies and gentlemen, I called out, climbing onto a picnic table, could I have your attention for a minute? The crowd turned toward me, curious. I saw Rose push through the people, her face already red with embarrassment. Most of you know me, James Garrison, owner of Garrison Auto. I've been part of this community for 20 years, and I wanted to share some news with you all. Rose was close enough now that I could see the panic in her eyes. My wife Rose and I are getting divorced. Now, I know that's not usually the kind of thing you announce at a public festival, but I figured you'd all hear about it anyway, so I might as well set the record straight. The crowd was dead silent now, hanging on every word. See, Rose here has been telling people that I'm not good enough for her, that I'm just a mechanic who got lucky. And you know what? She's right about one thing. I did get lucky. Lucky enough to find out who she really is before I wasted any more of my life on her. James, stop! Rose pushed through the crowd, her face flushed with humiliation. She's been sleeping with her boss, Phil Larkin, for the better part of a year, meeting him at the Riverside Motel every Tuesday and Thursday, but I guess when you're married to a loser mechanic, you've got to find your excitement somewhere. The crowd was murmuring now, phones coming out to record the drama. Rose looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground. The funny thing is, Rose always complained that I didn't make enough money, but it turns out I make plenty. Enough to own 3 rental properties, a successful business, and a cabin at Lake Winnebago. Funny how she never mentioned that when she was calling me a failure. Phil Larkin appeared at the edge of the crowd, probably drawn by the commotion. When he saw what was happening, he tried to back away, but it was too late. There's Phil now, I pointed him out to the crowd. Phil Larkin, everybody. Married father of 2, pillar of the community, and my wife's Tuesday and Thursday appointment. Phil turned and fled, pushing through the crowd like a man on fire. The whole festival was watching now, phones recording everything. Rose was crying, but they weren't the manipulative tears from before. These were tears of genuine humiliation and rage. You son of a bitch, she hissed. Now, Rose. Language. We're in public. I climbed down from the picnic table and walked away, leaving her standing in the middle of a crowd of people who would be talking about this moment for years to come. But I still wasn't finished. The following Tuesday, I was waiting in the parking garage beneath Phil's office building when he came down to his car. He looked like hell. Unshaven, wrinkled clothes, the kind of exhaustion that comes from not sleeping for days. Garrison. He didn't sound surprised to see me. Phil, you look terrible. Rough week? What do you want now? I want to show you something. I pulled out a manila folder and handed it to him. He opened it reluctantly, his face going pale as he read. Building permits, safety inspections, contractor licenses, I said helpfully. Amazing what you can find in public records when you know where to look. The documents showed a pattern of corner cutting and code violations in Phil's construction projects. Nothing that would send him to prison, but enough to destroy his reputation and his business. How did you... I know people, Phil. People who work construction, people who file permits, people who remember when developers try to save money by skipping safety inspections. Phil closed the folder with shaking hands. What do you want? I want you to understand something. You thought you were playing with a stupid mechanic's wife. But you weren't playing with her. You were playing with me, and I don't lose. I ended it with Rose. I fired her. What more do you want? I want you to remember this feeling, this fear, this helplessness, because this is how you made me feel when you were laughing at me behind my back. I took the folder back and got into my truck. Phil stood there in the parking garage looking like a broken man. The final phase of my revenge came together like a perfectly tuned engine. Rose's family had always looked down on me, treating me like hired help at their fancy dinner parties. Barrett with his old money arrogance, Marjorie with her social climbing, Chelsea and Danielle with their casual cruelty. They'd all had their fun at my expense over the years. Now it was my turn. The Pemberton family's annual garden party was the social event of the season, held at their lakeside mansion every August. Politicians, judges, business leaders, anyone who mattered in our little corner of Maine would be there. I wasn't invited, of course. I never had been, even when I was married to Rose, but that didn't mean I couldn't attend. I arrived at sunset, driving my best truck and wearing my most expensive suit. The valet looked confused when I handed him my keys, but he took them anyway. The party was in full swing on the back lawn, overlooking the lake. Japanese lanterns hung from the trees, a string quartet played classical music, and waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I helped myself to a glass of champagne and found Barrett holding court near the gazebo, regaling a group of local businessmen with some story about his latest investment. "Barrett," I called out, loud enough to interrupt his story. "Great party. Thanks for the invitation." He turned, his face going through several expressions before settling on forced politeness. "James, what a surprise. I hope you don't mind me crashing. I had some news to share with everyone." The group around Barrett was listening now, sensing drama in the air. I recognized most of them, the bank president, the mayor, a couple of city councilmen, Judge Morrison from the Family Trust. You see, I've been doing some research into the Pemberton Family Trust," I continued, pulling out a thick folder. "Amazing what you can find in public records when you know where to look." Barrett's face went pale. "James, this isn't the time or place." "Oh, I think it's the perfect time and place. See, everyone here should know that the trust fund has been mismanaged for years. Money borrowed against future distributions, investments made without proper authorization, funds diverted to cover personal expenses." Judge Morrison stepped forward, her expression stern. "What exactly are you alleging, Mr. Garrison?" I handed her the folder. "I'm not alleging anything, Your Honor. I'm just presenting facts. Bank records, investment statements, loan documents, all perfectly legal to obtain, all perfectly damning when you put them together." Barrett tried to snatch the folder, but Judge Morrison held it away from him. She flipped through the documents, her frown deepening with each page. "Barrett," she said quietly, "we need to talk. Privately." "There's more," I announced to the crowd. "Rose's affair with Phil Larkin has cost him his marriage and his business. The scandal has made it impossible for him to secure new contracts. His company will be filing for bankruptcy within the month." Marjorie Pemberton appeared at Barrett's side, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "How dare you come here and what? Tell the truth? You people have been living in a fantasy world, thinking your money and your connections make you untouchable. Well, guess what? I just touched you." The party had gone quiet now, everyone straining to hear the drama unfolding near the gazebo. I could see Rose pushing through the crowd, her sisters close behind her. "The trust fund is frozen pending investigation," I continued. "Phil's company is finished. Rose is unemployed and unemployable. Who's going to hire a woman known for sleeping with her boss? And Barrett, well, Barrett's about to discover what it's like to live without other people's money." Rose finally reached us, her face a mask of rage and humiliation. "You bastard! You've ruined everything." "I didn't ruin anything, Rose. I just stopped pretending that your family's shit doesn't stink." She raised her hand to slap me, but I caught her wrist easily. "Careful," I said quietly. "We're in public. Wouldn't want to make another scene." I released her wrist and turned back to the crowd. "I want to thank you all for 15 years of treating me like the hired help. It taught me something valuable about the difference between having class and having money. You people have money, some of you anyway, but you wouldn't recognize class if it bit you on your entitled asses." I finished my champagne and set the glass on a nearby table. "Enjoy the rest of your party. I'm sure you'll have plenty to talk about." I walked back toward the house, leaving chaos in my wake. Behind me, I could hear Barrett trying to explain himself to Judge Morrison, Marjorie sobbing into her handkerchief, and Rose screaming at her sisters. The valet brought my truck around, and I tipped him generously. As I drove away from the Pemberton mansion for the last time, I could see the party breaking up through my rearview mirror. Cars pulling out of the circular drive, guests fleeing the scandal like rats from a sinking ship. My phone rang as I reached the main road. Reggie. Jimmy, please tell me you didn't just do what I think you did. Depends on what you think I did. I think you just destroyed the most powerful family in 3 counties in front of half the state's political establishment. Then yeah, that's exactly what I did. Reggie was quiet for a moment. How do you feel? I thought about it as I drove through the summer evening, windows down, cool air washing away the last 15 years of humiliation and disappointment. Free, I said finally. I feel free. The aftermath was everything I'd hoped for and more. Barrett was removed as trustee of the family trust and faced a civil lawsuit for mismanagement of funds. The mansion went up for sale within a month, along with most of the family's other assets. Phil's construction company folded, just as I'd predicted. His wife divorced him and took half of what little he had left. He ended up selling insurance for a living, a far cry from the high-flying developer he'd once been. Rose moved in with her sister Chelsea, but that arrangement lasted about as long as you'd expect when you put 2 entitled, broke women in the same small apartment. She eventually found work as a secretary at a law firm in Portland, making 1/3 of what she'd earned at Phil's company. Her other sister Danielle married a man from Boston and moved away, cutting ties with the family entirely. Marjorie had a nervous breakdown and spent 6 months in a private facility, paid for by the sale of her jewelry collection. As for me, I threw myself into my work. Garrison Auto expanded into a 2nd location, then a 3rd. The rental properties I owned appreciated in value. The cabin at Lake Winnebago became my weekend retreat, a place where I could fish and read and enjoy the silence. I never remarried. A few women showed interest over the years, but I'd learned my lesson about the difference between love and convenience. I had friends, I had my business, I had my freedom. That was enough. 5 years after the divorce, I was having dinner at Murphy's when Frankie pointed toward the door. Don't look now, but your ex-wife just walked in. I looked anyway. Rose had aged hard in 5 years. Too much stress, too much drinking, too many disappointments. She was with a man I didn't recognize, someone who looked like he worked construction or maybe drove a truck, a working man like I'd been. She saw me looking and came over to my table. Hello, James. Rose. She stood there awkwardly, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Finally, she spoke. I heard about your success. The new shops, the properties. I'm glad things worked out for you. Are you? She nodded, though it looked like it cost her something to do it. I was young and stupid. I thought money and status were the same thing as happiness. And now? She glanced back at her companion, who was watching us from the bar. Now I know better. Tom's a good man. He works hard, treats me well, doesn't care about my family or my past. That's good, Rose. You deserve to be happy. She looked surprised by my response. Maybe she'd expected anger or gloating. But the truth was, I didn't feel anything for her anymore. Not love, not hate, just a kind of distant indifference. I owe you an apology, she said, for the way I treated you, the things I said. You were a good husband, and I threw it away for nothing. We both made mistakes. No, she said firmly. I made mistakes. You just finally stopped letting me get away with them. She started to leave, then turned back. That night at the anniversary party when you walked away, I knew right then that I'd lost something I'd never get back. Not just you, but the person I could have been if I'd been smart enough to appreciate what I had. Rose, I'm not asking for forgiveness or a second chance. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. What you did to my family, to Phil, to me, we deserved all of it. She walked back to her companion, and they left together. I watched them go, feeling something like closure settle over me. Frankie came over and refilled my beer. That looked intense. Not really, just the past finally staying in the past where it belongs. You ever regret it? The way you handled things? I thought about it while I finished my dinner. Did I regret destroying the Pemberton family fortune? Did I regret ruining Phil's business? Did I regret humiliating Rose in front of half the town? No, I said finally. They had it coming. And they did. For 15 years, they'd treated me like I was beneath them. Like my work and my money weren't good enough to earn their respect. They'd laughed at me behind my back, used me as their personal ATM, and expected me to smile and take it. Well, I'd stopped smiling, and I'd stopped taking it. The last time I saw any of the Pembertons was at Barrett's funeral 3 years later. Heart attack, brought on by stress and too much bourbon. I didn't go to the service, but I drove by the cemetery afterward and saw the small crowd gathered around his grave. Rose was there, along with her sisters and what was left of the family. They looked older, smaller somehow, diminished by years of financial struggle and social exile. Marjorie was in a wheelchair, her nervous breakdown having left her frail and confused. I didn't stop. There was nothing left to say, no final words or dramatic confrontation. They were just ordinary people now, dealing with ordinary problems like everyone else. The money and status that had made them feel superior were gone, leaving behind only the people they'd always been underneath. That evening, I sat on the deck of my cabin, watching the sun set over Lake Winnebago. The water was calm, reflecting the orange and pink sky like a mirror. A loon called from somewhere across the lake, its voice echoing off the water. I raised my glass of whiskey in a silent toast, not to Rose or her family, not to Phil or the past, but to the future, to the man I'd become when I'd finally stopped letting other people define my worth. Here's to the last 15 years, I said aloud, my voice carrying across the empty lake. And here's to the next 15. I drank the whiskey slowly, savoring the burn. When the glass was empty, I went inside and went to bed, sleeping the dreamless sleep of a man with a clear conscience. They'd wanted to break me, to keep me in my place as the grateful mechanic who'd married above his station. Instead, they'd taught me something valuable about power, real power, not the kind that comes from inherited money or social connections, but the kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're worth. I was James Garrison, owner of 3 successful auto shops, landlord of a dozen rental properties, and master of my own destiny. I'd been tested by fire and emerged stronger, wiser, and completely free. That was worth more than all their old money and social status combined.